So let's begin by introducing ourselves. I guess would be the right place to start. So I'll begin. I'm Treacy O'Connor. I'm based in Dublin in Ireland, and I have just launched a Substack back in October, thanks to the inspiration of Marisa and Jen as well, having already been here. I suppose what really drives me is how do we rewrite relationship with ourselves? And I do that through meditation, mindfulness with each other. And I hold space for ceremonies and really bringing in the wisdom of the ancient beings with the cosmos, with the earth. For me, that really lights me up. And I'm really driven by the land here in Ireland and by the myths and the legends here. As I know that Marisa and Jen are as well. So I'd invite you both to just share a little bit about yourselves. If in case anybody doesn't know you who's here, please do jump in. I'll start with you, Marisa.
Well, thank you so much again, Treacy, for conjuring this gathering. It's so wonderful to sit with the three of us getting together. Many of you may know me from Knotwork Myth and Storytelling. I've had the great honor and pleasure of having both Jen and Treacy on the show. And that has been really my passion project that's allowed me to connect to my own deepest work that I've been doing for decades and to really bring it out into the world and hopefully make a contribution with it. My Substack is Myth is Medicine, which is really in many ways the place where I, as a writer, get to show up and further amplify the stories and conversations that take place on the podcast. I'm here in the Hudson Valley of New York on the lands of the Lenape people, and that is always something I'm deeply aware of, even as I source so much of my inspiration and my spirit language, and of course, the mythologies and stories from 3,000 miles away. I'm also always conscious of what it means to be anchoring it into this earth, into this land, which in many ways is doesn't have the stories anymore because the original people were forced from this place. And it's a gorgeous and difficult tension that I'm always sort of trying to live in between. So from here on Turtle Island, I say thank you so much for welcoming me in. It's great to be here with you both.
Thanks, Marisa. Yeah, welcome. And Jen, welcome.
Yeah, so hello everyone. Yeah, thanks a million for curating this space today, Treacy and Marisa as well, from across the Atlantic. So yeah, my name is Jen Murphy. I'm the founder of the Celtic Creatives. You know, that's my Substack as well. And yeah, for me, like what my passion really is around exploring this idea of our dawn, and this old Irish term for, you know, the soul's gift, the soul's calling, what I would see as a creative destiny, because our ancestors structured early Irish society around the dawn. The leaders of early Irish society were the eight Dana, the people of creative destiny of the arts. And so, what does it mean to live into our dawn at these times, you know, particularly this time of polycrisis? And, you know, yeah, like how might we live into more of that soul connection to our ancestors, to the land, to our own creative process, our own creative spark, without having to leave modernity either, right? Because we are where we are, you know. So how can we infuse where we are with the dawn? And the idea is as well that the dawn is a gift given to us by, you know, the goddesses and gods. And when we live into it, we give back to them. And, you know, I want to say from the outset that the goddesses and gods and all the mythical beings within Irish and wider Celtic mythology are part of the natural world, right? They're part of the anima mundi, the soul of the world. So by living into, you know, our dawn, we are living into nature, our own nature in connection to the natural world around us. So yeah, there's my introduction today. That's
I'm already feeling it, Jen and Marisa. What a beautiful cauldron that we have. Thank you. Do you know, none of us prepared any of this today. And I think this was a lovely calling to step into the feminine aspect of who we're called to embody now in these days, of the non-linear, non-preparation, non-having questions prepared or answers prepared, and just to dive into this sense of trust that, as you said, Jen, in an email, which was part of our preparation, that, it's alive in us anyway. And whenever we want to call it forth, we can, just by, as you say, living into the dawn, which we all have. And I love that word as well, even though it's an Irish word. We're really stepping into a new dawn as a new beginning as well in these crazy times. I'd love to hear from you, Marisa, around how it is to be on Turtle Island these days, particularly, as you said, so importantly, that we've lost the sense of connection with the ancient and with the old stories. How is it to be living there in these times? Because myself and Jen would have a completely different perspective, not living it on the land.
Yeah. Well, there's that old phrase, it's always darkest before the dawn, right? So in many ways, like there is the heart that leaps at this idea of, yes, we're at a new dawn. And that also feels as if that is an ideal. It's just beyond the horizon. It's that light we have to carry within us, because when you poke your head up and out and look, my goddess, it's dark, right? And so there's just, I think it's become, and this, I'm sure you're very sensitive to and are very aware of as well, and we are around the world, is this dance between saying, at what point do we engage and say, how much attention are we meant to pay to every bit of diversion going on, and then at what point do we say, I'm going to go in and tend the inner hearth fire. I'm going to do my part in making the magic and brewing the inspiration and bringing in the light with a full awareness of the shadow and the nature of the cave, which of course we can play with that idea too, of the sense that darkness is that deeply generative in the cave beneath the soil where the seeds grow, and darkness is also the thing that we use to characterize what's happening when people's basic fundamental rights are being stolen, and there are all these blatant lies being told all over the place, and it's just scrambles the everyday consciousness we want to use, or that we're programmed to use in our everyday lives. Certain things should just work certain ways, and we should be able to rely upon them, move through our lives, and then also do our beautiful, magical dawn deep work. And in this moment of great destabilization, when there are fewer things to rely upon than ever before, when uncertainty is absolutely being consciously imbued into the system, we're left every day just to wonder, what do we anchor into? And I certainly don't have a single answer for that, but I do use that word anchor really purposefully, because I've, received that phrase as a gift from my Irish sisters, in terms of, like, part of my work is to be an anchor for Brigid, an anchor for Era on Turtle Island. And that has become for me what I need to keep coming back to, in terms of just the image of the anchor itself. We know what that is. We know about the ways in which the anchorist tradition, and the ways in which that holy being would end up really in her own seclusion within a church as part of really early Christianity, which I think had a beauty to it. And I'm sure there's layers upon layers in terms of how that worked, but there's a beauty to that. And I think, Jen, you've done some work on that recently, haven't you? I feel like I saw your name that. Um,
Yeah, a little bit maybe about Hildegard.
Hildegard, that's right. I saw your Hildegard. But, so in that way, I'm really conscious of how I can be in some sort of anchorist tradition that says, how can we anchor in the wisdom from the mythology, from the healthy cultures right now, that are existing within the globe, in terms of, Ireland has been such a phenomenal um light in terms of resistance and naming, like, for the rights of the people of Palestine. And it's, so there's ways in which cultures right now are acting as anchors and acting as lights. How can we call that in? And then also just remembering the bigger, longer, deeper, further everything's story, that we are living at the same time as living the crisis of every day. So I haven't a single answer, but I have some words to offer and some hopefully some spirit to hold, and then I dive back into the uncertainty with everyone else.
I love that, Marissa. It's so multidimensional, actually. To have a foot in this human world with what's going on, but a foot in the remembrance of what the ancient ancestors and the ancient goddesses lived to show us, and how to be embodied. And Jen is such a master at Celtic embodiment work, and particularly for women. So, how do we anchor those practices into ourselves, Jen, as fundamental practices for survival and to keep our stability and our sanity in what's going on?
Yeah, wow, that's such a big question, and there's a few things that are really emerging for me right now, just in light of what you said as well, Marisa. The image that's coming to me, and this might go off in a tangent, so you can pull me back if it does, but is that quote from Clarissa Pinkola Estes around the creation and the death face of the goddess being one of the same, as in different faces of the one goddess. And I'm thinking of Brigid in her role as a keener, right? So Brigid, we often associate, with this energy of Veriditas, the greening power of spring, like that Hildegard von Bingen energy as well. But Brigid is also the first woman to keen in Ireland as a goddess over the death of her son. And the phrase that is in the mythology is that from this, Brigid created a whistling to signal by night. So that's the phrase, a whistling to signal by night. And her whistling, her sound, her keen, which is the Irish verb to cry or lament, is psychopumpal in nature. It's taking us into night. And night in mythical traditions is death, in a way. So similar to Greek mythology, our ancestors believed that the soul traveled westward towards the setting sun, towards night, after the soul passed to Tir na Nog, right, to the birth of the new, the Elysian fields in Greek mythology. So, just staying with that energy of the goddess as this psychopump, as this intermediary between, the death of the old and the birth of the new. So I guess for me, a couple of things would be being able to hold or be in that liminality, right? And that space between, particularly at a time when we're so desperate for certainty, and as you spoke to Marisa, there is no certainty at the moment. So how do we stay in the in-between day and night? And Brigid obviously is a threshold goddess as well, right? She's born, even her mother has one foot in the household, the other foot on the outside of the household, and she's born on a threshold. So just staying with the liminality, and ways in which I personally stay with the liminality is by continuing to follow the energy, right? Because the energy keeps leading me place to place to place, even when there's not yet clarity. And I do that through dream work, by following my night dreams, really, really importantly. And because the night dreams come from the same place as the other world, right? The dreaming world and the other world are the same place. They're the place of psyche, of soul, and soul is connected to nature in Irish mythology. And then being able to hold that in the body, right? So I would do a lot of movement practice, just simple on all fours. Some of you will have experienced that with me before, to allow my body to just move as the space between, move as complexity, move as rage, as frustration, as grief, as joy, as all of it as well, but often guided by the energy of whatever comes through in my dream world. So, yeah.
And I don't know about you guys, but the dreams for me are kind of wacky right now. They've been off the charts and very, very potent, very vivid as well. So yeah, I mean, everybody can dream. And let's imagine that we can dream consciously, outside the nighttime dreaming. Let's imagine that we can dream a better world into reality too. At the same time, I think holding a vision of really what we want to live and holding that strong. And I'm noticing that there's an increase in wisdom in women's circles popping up everywhere, even in the most unexpected places, on every level. So for everybody who's holding a circle, or everybody who's just dreaming, to come together and to dream the same dream, I think is very powerful as well. It helps us to come into that space of liminality. I hold meditation circles as well. And every time, it's about coming into presence, as you say, Jen, to come into that space, in between, of presence, of just being here and now, because so often we're carried off into, the future or the past, particularly triggered by what's going on. And to come back into this moment is such an act of defiance, really, isn't it? It's a radical act. And I think the feminine one of being rather than doing. So the more we can practice that presence, the more we can be in an empowered place as women, as everybody, as men as well. But it's tapping into that feminine energy that all of us have, of just being strong in our power, in our knowing, and then to hold that vision of a better world, as Charles Eisenstein says, we know is possible. Yeah, thanks for that. I'm feeling my body needs movement big time as well, because I feel like I can kind of hold the density of what's going on, and it really weighs me down sometimes. I swim in the sea every morning, as you both know, and that definitely helps. Yeah.
Something you're naming, Treacy, that just feels important and just really resonating for me is that nothing that either you or Jen just spoke about is a luxury. And I think sometimes they are seen as when you have time, or aren't you lucky that you have space for that sort of thing? Isn't that nice that you could sit around with a bunch of women and have a chat? Or, spend this time really, being rather than doing. Must be nice. And I think, well, that's the culture that offers that to us. I think it's our own internalized patriarch, our own internalized misogyny, whether we're male or female, or anywhere on the spectrum. I just want to underline the sense of what you're naming is the nature of life itself. And I think that it's at our peril that we see anything along the spectrum of what you named as being, oh, well, if I have time, I will. Because I know, at least personally, I suffer every day. I don't leave room for that sort of depth or work, or just the slowing down and the pausing. So thank you, Treacy, for giving us that gift of just the reminder that it's the most essential thing at so many levels.
Yeah, I think you named it really well. In that, how we've been conditioned societally to continue to strive, to achieve, to, reach 100%, even from school age. It's not possible. And it's funny, because I was reminded today, I got a beautiful gift in the post this morning from a dear sister in the States, Martha, who sent me a card and a bunch of stickers. Look at this. I don't know if you can read it. Oops. New Year, the Lunar New Year, year of the snake. And it is the year of the snake. And these snakes are really powerful. They're stickers, and I feel like sending them to everybody for St. Patrick's Day.
Well, Treacy, they are postage stamps.
They are postage stamps. Well, they won't work in Ireland.
Well, they won't. But I just think one thing in the space of America doing so many terrible things, the U.S. Postal Service still makes beautiful art. So if you ever come here, you
Yeah.
could send a note to all of your Irish sisters, because those are letter postage stamps.
Wow. Amazing.
Love
They look like postage stamps,
Yeah.
but it's, I want to come back to Jen, because living in Skerries is said to be where St. Patrick, one of the places St. Patrick re-landed in Ireland, St. Patrick's Island. And we're coming up to St. Patrick's Day as well. I was born the day before St. Patrick's Day, so he's been very alive in my consciousness ever since I was born. And there's something in that whole narrative around, banishing the snakes from Ireland, which, let's be honest, there were never really any snakes in Ireland. There weren't any snakes in Ireland. So, Jen, I'd love your interpretation of how do we reclaim the inner snake, the feminine. As you said, Marisa, it's not linear. The snake is a representation for me of the ebb and the flow and the never straight lines. So yeah, Jen, I'd love your take on that, and how can we reclaim that as women, and the feminine within men as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. I'm kind of just thinking to myself, like, because the story in this town, and I'm not actually from this town, but I live in this beautiful town in North County Dublin. And one of the islands, it's called Niskerry in Irish, which means the Rocky Islands, the place where I live. And one of the islands, yes, Treacy said, is called St. Patrick's Island because he lived there at one stage and established a church, so the story goes. And he had this beloved goat. But the locals ate the goat and then he cursed them all, So it's just really strange. Like, even one of the local cafes is called A Goat in a Boat, and all of this kind of this theme of cannibalistic in a way, locals eating the goat. But anyway, I guess for me again, like, the snake is such an image of ambiguity, because the snake can be both feminine and masculine. It can be both good and bad. You know what I mean? So again, just like for me, when I feel into the snake energy, I feel again into that space between as well. Of being able to be fluid in that space between. But I guess for me, really. Yeah, like, in terms of, do you mean like in terms of a reclamation of the feminine in light of, say, the celebrations of Patrick?
Yeah,
Yeah.
where, speaking about the patriarchy of, that linear that was imposed on us, and perhaps, St. Patrick was brought in to uh, to bring in Christianity and away from our ancient ways. So yeah, in light of what we're going through today.
Yeah, I think, like, so one of the curious things about Patrick for me, that, that comes from his hagiographies, right? So the study of Patrick, and his kind of hagiographies are written down a couple of hundred years after he had passed. Now, he did write his own life as well, but one of the curious things to me that is said about him is that he banned Imbas ferocni. So Imbas ferocni, Imbas is like wisdom or knowledge that illuminates. It's almost like the light of nature, that spark, like the fiery arrow that we see in Brigid as well. And so he is said to have banned the practice of Imbas ferocni, because Imbas was divine inspiration, but it was also a ritual practice, right? So it was practiced by the Fili, the ancient poet seers, and the Druids and so forth. And it was seen as so threatening to the early Christian church that Patrick banned it, as being a heathen practice and so forth. And for me, like, our ancestors understood two types of wisdom. So they understood Imbas as this divine illumination, and also Sous. It's spelled like the French Sous, Sous, which is more of the kind of the scientific knowledge, and more of like what we might call book knowledge, even though our ancestors didn't have books in the sense of, in Gaelic culture anyway, it is an oral culture, and that's a decision, right? Because we had an early form of writing, Ogham, but our ancestors chose to use that for magical purposes and to keep things in the lore. But you know, the legacy of the likes of the image of Patrick, the banning of the Imbas, of patriarchy, of all of this linear approach, is that we're all sus. We're all like rational scientific knowledge, and we just have no time for Imbas, you know, for that more illumination, you know, that spark of Brigid, more of that feminine energy that just comes and we just know, you know. And then on the flip side as well, I often think about Sus, that like we don't even, right, say if we want to spend time understanding book knowledge, we're taught that we have to create hacks and hurry it up, right? Because there's not enough time even to learn. So like, you know, like neither, yeah, both have been harmed. And I guess for me, it's about making space for both Imbas and Sus, like a real reclamation of Imbas in particular, because Imbas is the light of nature. It comes again from the illumination of nature, being in co-creation with the other world as part of the natural world. And when we do that, you know, like all of the challenges, not all of the challenges, but when you're in open to that space of Imbas, of that co-creation with the other world, you know, like I find that a lot of the challenges that I'm faced in my world, particularly being very time poor as a parent to two small little boys, it melts, you know, and time expands. It almost becomes quantum. So yeah, so that's kind of just, yeah, a little reflection on Patrick. But I do think that there's something I'd love maybe to invite Marisa in here, because you know, around Patrick's time, we also have Sheila-na-Gig Day. And, you know, you just said a great statement yesterday, which was like, you know, now is the time for carved stone vulvas. So maybe you can, yeah, take that away in relation to Patrick as well. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that invitation, Jen. But I want to really sit down with you and be with this concept of sus and imbus. This is new to me, so I'm just savoring that as well. So thank you for that gift. Um, but yeah, so last year so as those you may know that March 18th in the folklore, mostly of the Irish in England in the 18th and 19th century, began to celebrate March 18th as Sheila's Day. And as the stories go, it was because, especially during Lent, St. Patrick's Day was a particularly great celebration because those who were abstaining may have stopped abstaining, let's say. So if there was great amount of drink taken on the 17th, one didn't necessarily want to end the party and or they had an aching head on the 18th. And so it was declared to be Sheila's Day, and there was very important to take that day off as well. So that's a bit of where the folklore had come from. And I'd be curious to hear from you as how much whether you grew up thinking about this or not. It seems like it really came out as like there was a couple of Irish Times stories, and a couple of scholars came out and sort of revealed this bit of folklore. And so it's been, as we do with the internet, we start to find like, oh, look at this, it's fun, and we pass it around, and it becomes both, there's truth to it. There's also our new imbuing of the modern, but it also becomes a gateway for us to investigate, to tell stories, to do some really powerful reclaiming. Um, because I'd say even more here, where St. Patrick's Day is really, I was in New York City this past weekend, and already the pubs have the cardboard shamrocks up and the ugly green garland, and it's just like Happy St. Patty's Day. We expect to sell more Guinness this week is really very clearly what was happening there. And overall, you know, St. Patrick's Day in the States is synonymous with day drinking and with a great deal of foolishness and zero reverence, less than zero reverence. um so all to say, when there's opportunities to find magic within the stories, my goodness, I'm glad we found it. So for me, I took it with the idea of, if Patrick and Sheila were married, what would their pillow talk have been like? Because we know we have Maeve and Alil from the Toyn, so there's that tradition of the pillow talk tradition in Irish mythology. So what would Sheila have had to say to Patrick? And just as a writer, as a storyteller myself, it just feels important to name, I wrote the story a year ago. I don't remember having written it. And I never remember. It's like the imbus comes in like a fever dream and then it's gone. It's like, well, thank goodness we have writing and we have recording these days. Because obviously it took the Fila and the Bardic tradition so much study to remember things so consciously, and we don't have that gift anymore. So thank goodness again for all of our modern tools. But I had told the story last year on the podcast, and I released it at St. Patty's Day as that kind of opposite sort of reclaiming. And then it occurred to me this year. I actually had Erica, who's our storyteller in residence, sort of reminded me of the story, and it gave me an opportunity to go back to it. And I realized I still want to tell the story exactly the same way, but I want to frame it with a new frame and say it's International Women's Day. How do we celebrate these hidden sources of the divine feminine? So those who, just to kind of loop back for a moment, Sheila-na-Gig they're found across Ireland, Britain, Wales, Scotland as these carvings of often a skeletal being. She has a skeletal head, which is rather enormous, and she's really bearing her vulva open wide, usually holding it with both hands. Sometimes she has breasts, sometimes she doesn't. And she's such a mysterious being, right? And whether she is warding off evil spirits, whether she is part of a fertility cult, whether she is some sort of warning to the Christians themselves not to go back to those dark old pagan ways, whether she's teaching us about death and rebirth being twinned, partnered together. Um, it was an opportunity for me to take that story back and say, hey, and here we are gathering ourselves right now in celebration of International Women's Day. Where do we take these stories from the darkness of the past, from their forgotten spaces, call them back in, give them new opportunities to speak to our modern moment with some reverence for where they came from. So I don't know, every time I have a chance to re-engage with Sheila, I find something new, especially because she doesn't necessarily have story attached. We have an opportunity to dream into who she might be and continue the conversation from there.
Mhm.
So thank you, Jen, for that chance to kind of be with Sheila a bit. It feels like this is her time as well, for sure.
Yeah, and I just want to mention something as well, like because it just feels really important to invite you, Treacy, to speak to, like, okay, so we have Patrick's Day coming up. It's a national holiday. We also have this reclamation of Sheila, but like you blazed a trail for us in making Brigid's Day a national holiday. Like, I mean, Brigid's Day was always a special holiday for me. As you know, I went to St. Brigid's primary school. So we got a day off school when nobody else did. So I was like, legend, love you, Brid, love you, Brigid. That was my first image of the goddess, a day off school. But you made it a national holiday. So maybe could you share a little bit about your experience, your inspiration, and yeah, just that whole process as well.
Well, I won't take full credit. Let's be honest. I just started a petition, and it was everybody else who caught on, and really brought it. I felt like it was time. And it's funny because when we started the petition in 2019, of course, the whole world shut down, and by the time we came out the other side, we were really ready for a holiday, but we needed an extra holiday. So it was all perfectly timed. But, I find that my relationship with Brigid has strengthened over the years. I didn't really know much about her, to be honest, because we didn't celebrate her in my school. As far as I remember, I didn't go to St. Brigid's School. But through the likes of Karen Ward, who's a real trailblazer as well for Brigid, who has established with Dolores Whelan the Brigid's Way Pilgrim Path, who's looking for signage at the moment, and just connecting in with the depth of the threshold, as you say, Jen, of what she holds, going from the TUATH and being a goddess into and transcending into Christianity, for me and it's very much embodied in me, being the bridge to connect the dots between the passage of the heart, to connect with the old and the new, winter and spring, to connect the dots, that there's an inclusion for everybody, that everybody's welcome under Brigid's cloak. And as you know, Jen, Marisa, I've I live in Balbriggan, which in Irish is named Baile Brigine, and nobody had made the association with Brigid and Brigine. And for me, that means Little Brigid, town of Little Brigid. Nobody had made that association before, but she whispered very loudly in my heart to anchor her energy into this town, which has 24,000 people, and as I discovered, over 46 nationalities, to bridge the divide between all cultures and all the community, to bring them together as one. So we did a procession of light last year through the town, and it's still rippling out. There's still people talking about how uplifted they felt. And it wasn't like, I'm an initiator and a facilitator, but really it's allowing the call of Brigid and her energy and her essence to speak through us and to ripple out through our hearts in everything we do. That just, it continues to ripple in many ways. And I really feel that now is the time, where we all talk about the rising feminine energies, and, St. Patrick has done an amazing job of illuminating the awareness of Ireland around the world, with all of the Irish immigrants who left these shores and brought St. Patrick's Day with them everywhere they went. It seems like everybody has a connection to Ireland in some way. And now that that's been established, I feel it's like now it's time for the other goddesses, the other legends of this land to really shine forth, to be able to lift the spirits of all of those who are experiencing the chaos that we're experiencing right now, and to live by the meaning from the myths and the legends, and to really embody that for today. As I said earlier, to keep us sane, to keep us connected. I feel we've lost connection with, as you said, Marisa, the stories, the ancient stories of the land, but also we've lost, as Monk O'Magan says, we've lost the connection in 32 Words for Field and other books that he's written. We've lost the connection with the original place names in Ireland that have been disconnected because they were named typographically, geographically, to let us know where we were in relation to the landscape. And by disconnecting from that, we're kind of disconnecting from a sense of who we are in relation to place and in relation to each other. So it's just there's so many opportunities for us now to be able to share this out to the world. So thanks for asking. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and it's so true. Just in terms of, I was just thinking there, like, not only place name. Now, place name obviously is critical as well, and Irish mythology goes on long tangents. In the sense of, maybe long efforts would be a better word, to really identify what happened in a particular place. It's very similar to, like, this book called Wisdom Sits in Places that has always stayed with me when I was an undergrad in anthropology. It's about the Western Apache. And how, just the wisdom of the ancestors is alive in the place. So when you cut somebody away from place, you are cutting them away from ancestors, away from soul. Again, this idea of the anima mundi, that the world is ensouled and that we are connected to that great soul, the feminine soul of the world, through our own souls. And so Irish, the Irish language and the animistic culture of Ireland holds that same resonance, but also in our names. Like my surname, like Murphy, just means nothing, but when you put it into Irish, it's Niverku, which means hound of the sea. And I do love the sea, I love sea swimming, and I'm obsessed with water. And then, on the other side, my mother's name is O'Sullivan. Again, what does that mean? Nothing. But in Irish, O'Sullivan, one-eyed, hawk-eyed, one eye in the other world. So, like, the destruction of our Chonga, like of our native tongue, has had repercussions, that I think we are only starting to grapple with now. And that's a really important part of the healing and post-colonial journey here. But, if we look at this on a global scale, and the loss of native tongue and the prioritization of the language of the colonizer, it really is a colonization of the mind and of the heart, because as we know, the Irish language is so poetic. It has so many meanings. Even a word that I've been working with a lot lately is Saoirse, right? Saoirse. Many people watching will know Saoirse Ronan. It's a girl's name, a woman's name. But Saoirse means freedom, liberty, immunity. But in Old Irish, it also means craft, and art. Because, in that way, in that inherent way, like creativity is a form of freedom. That it, like, I love the idea of it being an art, of being something as well, that, of course, there are certain times when freedom is taken away from us and we have no agency, but there is always a sense of internal agency with it, that it is an art, it is something that we can create from as well. So, yeah, that's, yeah.
That just fills my heart so much with remembrance and longing for a reclamation of that. And not just from Ireland, but I'm sure in every culture around the world, that we can reclaim that, as you said from the beginning, Marisa, the reclaiming of the old stories of where you live. What did you call the name of the land you live?
The Lenape people were the ones who lived here first. Yeah. And their name actually means original people in their language, which is just an interesting bit of extra poetry. Yeah.
There's something, sorry, Marisa, go ahead.
No, go ahead. And I have something to reply to on Jen said, but you go ahead first, please.
No, go ahead, because I'm going to
Oh,
change topic.
okay, cool. So I just want, in terms of what Jen is calling in and calling in the language specifically, and it's something that's often been, it's a little bit of it's a me thing because it's within my own lifetime, but that sense of right now there's such an awakening of the sense of the divine feminine in Ireland, and there's certain male writers in particular who are celebrating it with such passion, and that's amazing, and I'm deeply grateful. And there's also a part that says, yes, but I started studying this 25 years ago, reading the Irish women poets who already were doing the work and have been doing that work. And we go in these crests and waves of discovery and forgetting and reminding, and someone's always keeping the fires lit, but I mean, the poetry of Nuala O'Gonal changed my life to such a degree, like to the moment I am sitting here with you right now, because Nuala wrote her work and because I was learning how to translate, at an American university, trying to study that because I needed to get in touch with the world through her language. So just sort of speaking to what Jen's saying, and that union of calling in the Irish language itself and calling in the mythology and calling in one woman's wisdom that is connected to the land itself. It's that recognition of the foremothers who, and of course, Nula's still with us, God, thank the gods. But the tradition has, though, it's certainly named as a broken tradition in certain ways, there's these moments of light that have kept us ready for right now. And so, especially, I know we mentioned it's International Book Day. Is that what
Yeah,
today
World Book
named
Day.
as?
My kids
Yeah,
are
yeah.
going off to school this morning with their favorite books. So,
Oh,
yeah, I
yeah,
know.
yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, as we make that mix between oral culture and the written word, it's that celebration of like, right, these poetry books from that gallery press, from the last 30 years that have done so much to anchor in and give us so much of what we are able to share now. So,
Yeah, and can I just say one thing on, because it's etched in my brain around Sheila-na-Gig. There's a quote from her where she talks about whether we are conscious of it or not, Irish people are bilingual. So whether you speak Gaeilge or not, you are bilingual. Your consciousness is bilingual, and I feel the same for the Irish diaspora as well. And I feel like that is so liberating to feel like, to be bilingual in consciousness is how I see it. That we, like, even when we're not speaking the language, and of course, yeah, like, to make the effort to do so, but also to know that inherent nature of the native tongue still lives and breathes within us. And it gives us a bilinguality of consciousness that helps us to become, I feel, the land of storytellers and creativity and all of that as well. So I just want to bring that in.
Yeah, absolutely gorgeous. And as you say, the diaspora, there are so many who call themselves Irish, whether first generation, second, third, fourth. There is a seed of Irishness, perhaps in many, many people around the world, that can call on those remembrances of that bilingual nature, and the bilingual nature of being able to dance between realities at the moment as well, because it feels to me somewhat mythological what we're living through right now and what is on the world stage right now, and stage being like a theater in some sort, in some respects, and how it's like how would you guys compare it to the myths and the legends of what we've seen before, just to give us a context of how obvious the darkness can be and how brilliant also the light can be to bring us through and to give us a sense of hope, I guess.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me is actually not in the Irish tradition, but comes from the Andes, and that idea of the Pachacuti and the sense of the world being turned inside out, and that sense of these things happening in cycles. And there are this idea of some ideas of prophecy around it, but the in some level, because we know that mass extinctions have happened around the globe, in the world, in the history of the earth, 5 times. We know that there have been times when civilizations, the monuments of Ireland were not built by the Celtic people. They were built by a people who came before, who, as far as I know, have no genetic connection to the current people of the island. Knowing these past ways in which, though we cannot comprehend an end of our way of life, the earth herself has known these moments of great death, of great loss, of probably a long, fallow, quiet time, and then some sort of rebirth, and it looks nothing like what came before. And that is an interesting kind of cold comfort, but it is at least that sense of saying we are part of a more than human world. We are more than our current economic system, our current, political machinations and collections of power. Okay, can we take that vision of deep time and that really global view and imagine what it might be like from, I don't know, the eyes of the divine? Can we have that level of, without hubris, but to sort of say, if we are devoted to these spirits of place, to these beings we call goddesses, they've got a vastly different perspective on the human experience and what we have a right to and what we have a need for, because this is one long journey: life, death, rebirth. We just don't know what's on the other side of that next portal, with our own gorgeous, fallible human minds.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, in terms of like the invitation to bring in the more than human world as well, in the sense of, in a very simple way, to look at how the natural world works, and bring in like the Gaelic seasons, the cycles of nature. So from Samhain, from that deep, death, that decay, that dark night of the soul, into Imbolc, the Viriditas, the greening power, the first sprouts, into Bealtaine, the full bloom, and then into the harvest season of Lunasa. And what's really interesting about the Celtic seasons is that they align as well to, psycho-spiritual and to matter-based alchemy, right? So the 4 kind of core stages of alchemy are the Negredo, right? So the blackening, the dark night of the soul, when something is shattering within us and we have to stay with it. And it's incredibly, incredibly painful. The old way of of us viewing the world just cannot work anymore. You know, and I mean this at both an individual level, micro, and also at the macro level as well. So we have the nigredo, the darkening, that's the Samhain. And then from all of the depth that's put into the soil comes the albedo, the whitening, the imbulk, the development of a new consciousness. But the new consciousness is only forming. But by the time we meet Bealtaine, we're in the citrinitas, the yellowing, the solar energy. It's getting brighter and brighter, the new consciousness, whatever we need to know. And then by Lunasa, we're in the rubedo, which is the reddening, the final stage of alchemy. And, you know, the reddening comes from the rush of new blood, of new life force, you know. So, yeah, just feeling that in the natural world as well. And I know, I mean, it's incredibly painful to stay in Samhain, but we are in a global Samhain, you know, in ways at the moment, you know.
And you reminded me as well that nature continues regardless, and never more did we really witness that than during COVID. You know, when the whole world seemed to stop, nature kept singing the songs, the bird song was there, you know, the sprites kept shooting. And it was March as well. I remember it was a springtime to give us that sense of hope and coming back to reconnection with nature at a very core level. So I think that is one of the key tools that we have to comfort ourselves, for sure. And let's hope, and let's send that vision out and hold that vision together. I'm conscious that my phone battery is running low, so before it actually cuts us off, let's take time to close together. And perhaps, are there any closing words, or perhaps, because it's International Book Day, or World Book Day, do you have any books that you'd like to share with anybody before we leave? Any closing words of wisdom?
I first wanted to say thank you so much, for making this happen, Treacy, for having the vision at so many levels and at the basic, beautiful technical level of making this happen. And I have a book at my elbow that I feel like it just came out 2 days ago. And Sophie Strand is a brilliant sister here in the Hudson Valley. And her book, The Body is a Doorway, A Journey Beyond Healing, Hope, and the Human. And she speaks to she speaks from the voice of the planet and the mycelial consciousness of the earth itself, and from her deeply embodied personal story. And it just feels like she's been a voice in my ears for the last couple of years. She's been on the podcast. She's a friend, and her writing is so powerful. And it feels like a voice to bring into our conversation today from this side of the ocean. She is a sister of the Hudson Valley. So
Oh, thanks so much for bringing that in. I know Sophie as well. She is incredible. And to have gone on that journey and to be able to write about it is just shiny. She's such a shining light. So, yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, Jen, how about you?
Yeah, she's definitely a shining one. And yes, just to say thank you as well, Treacy, for the technical, like going live to me is like, you know, I'm just going to show up and it's just going to happen, because technical things like this are not my gift. But actually, what I'm
Me
thinking of
neither.
now,
Me neither.
well, you've done it very well. But can you see this? I can't. Oh, yeah, sorry. This is Celtic Wonder Tales. Oh my God. Sorry.
I
This is
know
how
it's
I
backwards.
can't actually work technology, right? By Ellie Young. And this is written in about 1909, I think, and it's illustrated by Maud Gonne, so the Irish revolutionary. Ellie Young, like, what a legend. What an incredible, phenomenal human being. She was a shining one. You know, and I was sharing this in a retreat I hosted on Substack the other night, you know, just an excerpt from this. And I think I shared it with you as well recently, Treacy, in the libraries. But I just want to share, maybe it just popped into me there, around, like, just in the first kind of chapter of this book, and I won't labor this, but it's called, well, the first story is called The Earth Shapers. And basically, you know, the world is in so much pain, and this was written at the start of the 20th century. And Brigid is persuading the TUATH, the gods, to really just come back into the earth, into partnership with the earth. And, she basically sings this poem, and the gods are like, who sings that? It's not you, Brigid. And she says, it's the earth. And, she says like that the earth is singing, and they're like, oh, just ignore that cesspit of hell, just forget about it. And she's like, no, I won't forget about it. And she says that the earth wails all night because it has dreamed of beauty, and for me, I just feel like, like just in the context that we're in, just to continue, even though the earth is wailing at the moment, to dream of beauty and to dream of beauty with the earth. And Brigid says at the end, so I'll end with these words. She says, then come with me, said Brigid, and I am going to put my mantle round the earth because it has dreamed of beauty. So, yeah.
That's very soothing. And so let's end on that note. I just want to share a book that came to mind, A Legacy of Wisdom by Judith Nyland. And again, Judith is on Turtle Island as well, but has a deep connection to the land here. And it's a beautiful book of searching for spiritual grounding in through the Celtic myths and legends as well. It's beautiful. So, Legacy of Wisdom. And it reminded me of, as you were speaking, Jen, the myth of Fintan mac Bocra, when the chieftains were at a loss, they kind of lost their purpose, and he brought them all together to remind them of their direction and, what the north holds, what the east holds, the south and the west, particularly in Ireland, and to remind us of our purpose and connection to where we are in this time. But I really want to also just really thank you both for being here, for joining me in this live. My first live was only a couple of weeks ago on Instagram, so we're all in the same boat. We've just got to jump in and dive in and trust that we're being held. But I really want to honor both of your wisdom and all of that that's alive within you, within me, and that beautiful image of Brigid's mantle enclosing us and enfolding us, because the earth's dream is beauty. So let's hold that in our hearts. It's such a beautiful image to hold and to end on. And thank you so much to everybody who's joined us. I really appreciate you all being here. I know we all do. And for those of you who may have missed the live, the recording will be up later on and we can share it with so many others as well. So deep, deep blessings for this International Women's Day coming up, for the unfolding of beauty in our hearts and the reconnection to all that is meaningful and alive in the in-between. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Treacy.
Thank you, Treacy.
Blessings.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Slán.
Slán.
Bye.